Hello? Hey Patrick, I don't know if you saw the upcoming Hearthstone nerfs, but I'm not too sure on it. I think they missed a couple of cards. What have you been up to?
Sleeping.
How could you be sleeping at a time like this? They completely forgot to nerf a couple of cards.
Well, I'm listening.
If you have not heard, there are going to be a couple of nerfs for both standard and wild. Some of them are pretty significant changes, but after going through these notes, I feel like they missed a couple of cards. But let's go through the nerfs first. Around 80% of you are not subscribed, so why don't you go click that button right now? I'll wait. You didn't do it, did you? Starting off with wild, we see two pretty big changes here. We have Kalthos and Switcheroo both getting changed. Kalthos is going to its pre-nerf state before it was reverted. Basically, it's going back to where it was before they did the buffs, which means that every third spell no longer costs 0, it costs 1. I played Wild recently and I got to play the Druid deck that would be able to kill you on turn 1, and I fully agree with this change. This deck probably should not exist, even though it is Wild. Losing a game on turn 1 is absolutely ridiculous. It actually kind of blows my mind that they even reverted this card. When they nerfed it previously, it was already a problem in Wild. So reverting it didn't make any sense, but there's a lot better cards released, so the deck was just absolutely ridiculous. Next we have Switcheroo, and rather than swapping its stats, you only swap health. This is obviously a really big change for the card. It's no longer going to be a super cheesy card because health is not as relevant as attack. You're doing 12 damage at turn 3. That's absolutely ridiculous. This card will probably still see play in some cases, even in standard. I think the best part about this card was just the ability to draw 2 minions. It's funny because I actually predicted that card to be the best card of the set, and it ended up getting nerfed, so maybe I was right. Let's go on to standard. Pufferfist is going from a 3-mana 3/4 to a 3-mana 3/3. This card was really good in almost every single aggressive deck. It was just a premium stat line. It worked really well in Demon Hunter and virtually every single deck that needed a pirate, which includes Pirate Rogue and Quest Pirate Warrior. And I'm sure there's other cases for this. Maybe you want to put this in an aggro druid deck so you can use your hero power if you really want to. This was a good change. This card was obviously very overstated for the effect that it had. This card can win games just on its own because if you are playing in a tempo-based matchup, your opponent can't deal with the Pufferfist, well, they're probably going to be losing boards from there on out, and that just feels rather horrible. It also indirectly nerfs Pirate Warrior a little bit, which actually leads me on to my next nerf. The Warrior questline will actually be getting a nerf as well. Rather than having to play 2 pirates for the final phase, you will now have to play 3 pirates for the final phase, which will probably delay Rarran for 1 extra turn. Now, what does this actually mean for the deck? Looking at its matchup spread, it's a very interesting nerf. The matchup that Pirate Warrior suffers in the most is aggro decks. You can see that Token Demon Hunter absolutely destroys it. Pirate Rogue, which is a pretty aggressive list, does a pretty good job against it. A Ramp Druid also does a pretty good job against it because you just can ramp over their damage. It's not good against Quest Hunter, and it's not super good against Face Hunter. So delaying Rarran by an extra turn, I don't know what that really solves because it's already doing rather well against control decks. Maybe that extra turn really helps control decks actually stabilize. We'll have to wait and see how impactful this change actually is. And of course, with the Pufferfist change, maybe Pirate Warrior stops being as good of a deck. I am still very surprised that they did not just change the Juggernaut and Nelly to not be able to generate Mr. Smite. It feels like that's a better change for Pirate Warrior rather than anything else. And it's very easy to do. They just have to change the wording on the Juggernaut and Nelly to only be able to generate pirates that cost 5 or less because Mr. Smite's 6 mana. It just seems like a win-win. It will be interesting to see how Pirate Warrior does after these changes because of the other nerfs that they're doing. So Druid's getting a nerf. Miracle Growth is going from 7 mana to 8 mana, which is a very interesting change when you consider the amount of great cards that Druid has. This change is very interesting and reminds me a lot of Skullman's Academy when they decided to nerf Guardian Animals from 7 to 8 mana. That change was a pretty significant deal, and a lot of people thought it wasn't a big deal, and it kind of changed the way the deck plays, and it made it a lot worse. Before this change, what you would do is you would ramp right into Miracle Growth. So if you played Nourish or you played Guff, it was extremely easy just to play this on curve. Now you probably need an extra turn, or you need an extra card like Innervate to actually play Miracle Growth right after you ramp. This in turn delays that huge taunt that helps you against aggressive decks, which means a lot more decks can get under Druid. I do think this change is going to be really impactful to Druid, but I am still surprised that Wildheart Guff got off with absolutely no changes. The card has a ridiculously high mulligan win rate. Why not just make Guff 6 mana? Like, I don't understand. The card is ridiculously powerful, and I get that it may not be the fundamental issue with Druid, but the card's always going to be relevant throughout the entire year of standard. So why not just change the card? Make it 6 mana, make it so you can't gain an empty mana crystal, whatever you got to do. But I think the reason they did not do this is because of the Kazakhstan change. They finally did it. They finally nerfed Kazakhstan, which probably should have happened before the expansion came out. And the change is actually rather big. Rather than his battle cry saying if all minions in your deck are dragons, you have to actually play 4 other dragons in order to craft a new custom deck, which is really significant because it takes a lot more time to actually get Kazakhstan online, and you have to play dragons in your deck. This is a ginormous deal, especially for Druid, because no longer Druid will be the most well-rounded deck in the format. What happened previously is that Druid was decent against aggro, really good in mid-range, really good late game, and then if your giants were not enough, you play Kazakhstan and it's like going through a whole nother gauntlet. Now Druid won't be able to do that, which means their late game does falter to extreme control decks. Control Warrior gets a lot better, Control Paladin gets a lot better, which means there's more room for other slower decks in the format because they don't just auto lose to Druid. So this is a ginormous change, and it will definitely impact the metagame. I honestly feel like if they just nerf Kazakhstan, I don't even think Miracle Growth was really needed for a nerf whatsoever, but I still think Wildheart Guff, even with consideration with Kazakhstan, probably should be changed somewhat. Overall, really good changes from the developers. They obviously have a lot of insight on the current metagame and what the big problems are, but there are 2 cards other than Wildheart Guff, which we probably need to talk about. This is the data of HS replay of all cards being played in standard right now. And if I sort by mulligan win rate, there is 1 card that was not nerfed that I think absolutely needs to be touched because of how high the win percentage is. And that is Drekthar. Drekthar is the 4 mana 4/4 battle cry. If this costs more than every minion in your deck, summon 2 of them. This is currently the highest mulligan win rate card in the game right now. And I'm telling you, after these nerfs, it will probably still remain like this. This is a type of card that reminds me a ton of Prince Keleseth, and it's also just pretty toxic for the game. Now, the reason why I think this card needs to be changed is because almost every single aggressive style deck runs this card. The biggest issue with this card though is that it makes almost every single aggro deck play the exact same way. Play a super low curve deck, put Drekthar in, Drekthar gets played. It's the same play pattern over and over again. And honestly, it's like the reverse Kazakhstan. This is a card I'm very surprised they didn't touch, and I feel like because they released a diamond version of this for $25, they're not nerfing it anytime soon. Probably the best comparison of this card right now is Barnes and Wild, and Barnes still sees play at 5 mana because how impactful the card is when you actually play it. We gotta stop making cards like this play Hearthstone. It's not good for the game, it's bad. The last deck I think that needs to be touched is Quest Hunter. Maybe I'm a little jaded from seeing Quest decks so often, but the fact that Quest Hunter still has not been nerfed and Druid getting worse means that this deck is gonna be in full force. It's pretty decent against aggressive style decks, and it's also really good against late game decks because you just burn them out. Maybe we do the same thing with the Pirate Warrior nerf. Make it so one of the quest lines requires 3 spells rather than 2. Just delay the deck 1 more turn. It would probably be really beneficial for a lot of the community if that deck was just slightly nerfed. I think a lot of players are tired of playing against quest lines, and this honestly looks like the last one we're gonna have to worry about, and I'm really scared based on the nerfs that they have done that Quest Hunter is gonna become more popular, and it's already a good deck right now. I think it's tier 2. Maybe we nerf that. Please, Blizzard, no one wants to play against that. Now, if you're surprised they didn't nerf the actual best deck in the game right now, which is Aggro Demon Hunter, the reason why that deck is so good is that it completely counters Druid. But if Druid gets worse, that deck gets worse, and I'm sure if it does become a problem, they will end up nerfing it, but I'm with them on this. I think the deck gets a lot worse with other decks getting better, which is exactly why you should play these good decks after the nerf hits. Control Warrior, Control Paladin, Quest Hunter, but don't play it please, or otherwise I will find you. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you ended up enjoying it, and I will see you in the next one, you fantastic individual.